Before we dive into the main topic, please take a moment to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like this podcast, and leave a comment to support the channel. Your engagement truly helps. Welcome to the debate.
Welcome.
Our focus today is on, well, a friction that's pretty much inherent in all human societies, the generational gap, and, the intergenerational conflicts that come from it. This is more than just arguing about smartphones. It really tests the basic way that values and beliefs get transmitted, how we pass things down.
Exactly. It's a profound stress point. We're talking about everything from careers to family to finances. The gap creates real conflict because the reality for the younger generation often forces them to challenge these really deep-seated assumptions that their elders hold.
Which brings us right to our central question for today. When we're trying to manage these conflicts, where does the main responsibility lie? Is it fundamentally on the younger generation to maintain respect, hold the certain boundaries, and make sure their frankness doesn't just burn the whole bridge down?
Or, as I'll be arguing, does that responsibility fall mainly to the older generation to show some, let's call it mental agility, to actually accept challenges to their conventional wisdom, and really cultivate an awareness of the world their kids are actually living in? I think adaptation is the key here, not just deference.
And I'll be arguing that stability, the kind that allows crucial wisdom to actually be passed on, really depends on the younger generation respecting the established conduct that makes that whole process possible in the first place. Look, the desire for honesty, what the source material calls frankness, is obviously important for growth. I get that. But its execution has to be governed by a basic obligation to treat others respectfully. We have to think about the damage that happens when that frankness is, taken too far. It can put people off instantly, especially older generations who are looking at the conversation through a very different lens. I mean, if you spent your life bringing up a child, maybe with strict values you thought were vital, and then that child just sort of dismissively talks back, it jeopardizes that whole mechanism of transmission.
So, to me, the very first step in bridging any gap has to be maintaining the decorum that keeps the structure intact.
Okay, I understand the emphasis on structure, I do. But framing this whole conflict as just a failure of respect, I think that really misdiagnoses the root of the problem. These conflicts often start not because of some youthful arrogance, but because the older generation fails to see that their conventional wisdom might not work anymore. Or worse, that it might be based on outdated, even prejudiced views in how they treat people. My position is that the younger generation plays a necessary, a positive role by using their mental agility to question those conventions. If the elders' first reaction is to just interfere or demand respect, well, they're stifling the very evolution that needs to happen. The solution has to start with the elder cultivating awareness and having the patience to listen to some hard truths. I struggle with this idea that the failure is all on the younger generation for, pushing too hard. Let's break that down. What does taking frankness too far actually mean? Is there an objective line? If a younger person using that mental agility we talked about presents a well-researched, rational idea that completely contradicts their parents' advice, is that automatically talking back just because it doesn't show deference? I mean, the goal is honesty without disrespect. If the substance of the challenge is valid for today's world, shouldn't the elder prioritize that reality over a perceived violation of etiquette? It feels like we're putting form over function.
And I appreciate that focus on substance. But the distinction between necessary honesty and destructive behavior is found precisely in recognizing the structure of that relationship. When we talk about how we treat others, especially our elders or those who brought us up, respect isn't just a formality. It's the acceptance of boundaries that come from that shared accumulated wisdom. If the younger person's argument is basically a complete dismissal of the elder's life experience, it stops being a debate and it just becomes, relational destruction. If the elder feels totally invalidated, their patience, their ability to listen, it just evaporates. That failure to respect the boundary is what turns an honest critique into a harmful conflict. It's the difference between asking why and just declaring, "You're wrong."
But what happens when those boundaries themselves are the problem? What if they're obstructive? We're talking about how society evolves, and the younger generation is often the first to see the systemic flaws that the older generation might be, culturally blind to. If the number one rule is don't violate the structure, then progress just grinds to a halt. The elder, with all the maturity you're talking about, should be able to hear that intense frankness as a diagnostic tool, not just a personal attack. Mental agility isn't just for the young. The elder has to use it to shift their own perspective.
Well, that takes us right to the function of conventional wisdom itself, which you seem to view as just an obstacle. It's not just a set of arbitrary rules, it's distilled knowledge. It's wisdom accumulated over generations about survival, about how society works. Think about the context for values like seize the moment, or what it means to come of age. I mean, these were often achieved in times of real scarcity, huge challenges. And that led to values that prioritized discipline, hard work, proven paths. So when a younger generation, maybe feeling more tech-savvy or secure, just dismisses that foundation, they're not just challenging a thought. They're kind of rejecting centuries of evidence-based survival strategies that were passed on for a reason. They worked.
I acknowledge the history. I do. Its value is historical, but that doesn't mean it's automatically current. And relying too heavily on that is exactly what causes this conflict, especially when those old principles clash with today's reality. Take the idea of a linear career path. That was a core value passed down for decades. Today, it's largely obsolete. A younger person has to pivot constantly to survive. So if an elder insists they live by your principles from a world of industrial stability, they're essentially setting the younger person up to fail. It becomes a moral necessity to challenge that. The burden has to be on the elder to recognize that their wisdom, while hard-won, might have become irrelevant or even prejudicial when you apply it to, say, the digital economy or new social norms.
But that argument seems to minimize the role of the younger person in making that exchange even possible. If the old values are just rejected immediately with contempt, why would an elder bother to update their view? If every conversation is met with this open derision for how things used to be, the elder's instinct isn't to cultivate awareness, it's to retreat and, yes, interfere, because they see a breakdown in the basic agreement of the relationship. The delivery matters. The younger generation has to manage that delivery to show respect for the history, for the structure, even while they're arguing against its current use. That way the wisdom can be debated, not just discarded.
But that puts a huge, unfair unburden of emotional labor on the very people who are trying to adapt and move forward. I mean, given the emphasis on patience and understanding, I really believe the primary burden has to rest with the well-informed parent, with the elder. They have the maturity, the emotional regulation, and they know how they brought the younger person up. They should be the ones to start bridging the gap by cultivating their own awareness and showing the patience it takes to absorb that youthful frankness. In any discourse, leadership should fall to the more experienced party, right? They have to model how to handle disagreement without taking it personally.
The elder might have more maturity, yes, but bridging the gap has to be a mutual desire. And the key to starting that process is the challenger adhering to those respect boundaries. If the younger generation's first move is to aggressively talk back and reject all authority, the older generation will inevitably feel, well, put off. And that feeling makes them want to interfere because they see it as a catastrophic failure in judgment. You can only have that intellectual engagement, that patience you're talking about, when the challenger first accepts the premise of a dialogue. And that requires decorum. Without that foundation, the elder has no reason to be agile. They'll just defend the structure.
But the challenge to the decorum is often unavoidable because the elder has tied the decorum to the conventional thought itself. If you demand a method of communication that automatically stifles the critique, well, you're asking the younger generation to pretend to live in a world that might not exist anymore. It's stability versus progress. If progress requires a more direct, a more frank dialogue, then the old structures have to adapt. It's the elder's job to filter the emotion out of the challenge and address the substance, not just punish the delivery because it feels new or uncomfortable. That is the ultimate test of their mental agility.
Ultimately, for me, the functional transmission of values, of that wisdom we need for long-term resilience, It all relies on the younger generation exercising extreme caution. They have to make sure their frankness doesn't cross that line into disrespect or just a rejection of all boundaries. By respecting the conduct, they ensure wisdom gets passed on and debated, not just shattered.
And my position remains that the true measure of success here is the elders' capacity to adapt. It requires them to show profound mental agility, to tolerate the intense, necessary questioning of their own conventional thoughts. Only by cultivating that awareness and adjusting their expectations can they really foster honesty without disrespect and make sure the relationship actually evolves instead of just stagnating.
The generational gap will always present this tension, won't it? The need for stability versus the need for constant challenge. And bridging it clearly requires a very sophisticated navigation of that balance from both sides.
Indeed. There's always more to explore in this material and this timeless conflict.
Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like, and leave a comment to support the channel.